Good evening. I would like to open the meeting and welcome everyone to the ordinary meeting of Council for the 8th of May 2018. On behalf of Moonee Valley City Council, I would respectfully like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land on which Moonee Valley is located, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and we pay respects to their spirits, ancestors, elders and the community members past and present. We also extend this respect to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people here today. I'd like to advise members of the gallery that this open session of this meeting are being recorded and live streamed on the internet. The recording will also be archived and made available on Council's website. Gallery attendees are advised that their presence may be recorded. Apologies for tonight. Councillor, as you have probably realised, the Mayor, John Sypek, is an apology at this time. He may be arriving later in the meeting. I don't believe there are any other apologies. 3. Confirmation of minutes. Councillors, do I have any opposition to any items on the minutes for the ordinary meeting of Council held on Tuesday, the 24th of April 2018? If no, the minutes are confirmed. So no. Item 4, declarations by councillors. Do any councillors have a conflict of interest on any item on the agenda tonight? Councillor Gauchi-Marici.
Thank you. I have an indirect conflict in relation to 12.1 due to the residential amenity of family members.
Thank you. Any other councillors with any conflicts of interest to declare? No. Okay, item number 5, presentations. Councillors, do we have any presentations this evening? No. Number 6, petitions and joint letters. Councillors, do we have a petition to be presented?
We do have a petition from a Robert McDonald, and this is in relation to some concerns about traffic changes and requests to review of traffic changes in Tennyson Street in Moonee Ponds.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Were there any other petitions and joint letters received? 7, questions from the public. We now move to questions from the public, and I ask the Acting CEO, Mr Stephen Lambert, whether we have received any questions.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yes, we have 2 questions from the gallery tonight from Rose Isa, and I can see Rose is in the room, and I'll pass those through to our Director of Planning and Development, Natalie Ryder, to answer.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. Ms Isa asked, which of the actions listed in the Moonee Valley Community Facilities Plan 2011 have not been completed as of May 2018, and which of these incomplete actions have not been included in the draft MV 2040 Action Plan Community Facilities? So I'm pleased to report that the actions identified in the plan are either complete or underway, with the exception of one public amenities or toilet block, and that is will be picked up under our small infrastructure ongoing program that we work through.
Thank you. Okay. We now move on to item number 8, reports by Mayor and Councillors, of which we have nil. Item number 9, reports. Item 9.1, 95 Buckley Street. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillors, item 9.1 on tonight's agenda, 95 Buckley Street, Moonee Ponds. Do I have a motion?
I'll move a motion in the form of the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Do I have a seconder?
Sorry. Yeah. Sorry, Chair. I'll move an alternative motion. So it reads as the officer's recommendation with additional conditions. Would you like me to read them out or just table them?
Yes, please, as someone
All right. So new condition 24 to require the preparation of a section 173 agreement in relation to noise impacts from the church bells on the amenity of future residents of the proposed development. New condition 1U to require the deletion of the 5th level. New condition 1V to require a plaque to be located within the front facade, acknowledging and outlining the site's history as the St Helens Private Hospital. And that is all the changes to the original recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Councillor Nation, would you like to speak on the item?
Yes, thank you, Chair. This application is at 95 Buckley Street. It's a site which is adjacent to the Ukrainian church, and the proposal before us was initially in the meeting papers a 5-storey development consisting of 27 2-bedroom units, 10 3-bedroom units, and a cafe and retail space at the base. There are a couple of sensitive interfaces for this particular application. Predominantly there is the church next door. Now, it's been noted, it was noted in the report that the church were an original objector to this application. However, conditions have been made in this amendment, in the report, and both in the amendment which appeases the majority of their concerns. And that includes the addition of a section 173, and probably the one big outlier to what's entailed in the report is that deletion of the 5th level, and therefore the amended motion on the floor. A lot of the other non-compliances, such as rear setback, the bulk at the setback, the side setback, have all been conditioned to conform with standards. So hopefully the removal of that 5th storey brings it down to an appropriate height, recognising that it is in an area which is undergoing significant development, particularly on the corner of Buckley and Russell, and down Russell Street. The other sensitive interfaces are on Carlisle Street for properties 3 and 5, and also a property at the rear on Bloom Street. Only one of those properties are listed as objectors, and I believe the reduction in the bulk at the rear and the setbacks that have been conditioned give an appropriate response to the area. It's not an ideal response, and I completely acknowledge that, but when weighing up how much work has gone into conditioning this application to ensure that it has a lesser impact on those properties around, I believe if we were not to approve this tonight, and if it was to escalate to VCAT, then we would have not a great chance at defending a refusal, and in my opinion we could end up with a worse outcome on the site. It's an area undergoing quite a transitional change, as I mentioned. It is a 4-storey development if this motion gets up, and I think with all things considered and the work that the planners have put into ensuring that it is somewhat sensitive to the area, I believe this is the best outcome for this application.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Councillor Cusack, would you like to speak on the item?
Thank you, Mayor. In the councillor's original proposal recommendation that we were to consider tonight, it had looked at the issues. It looked at the issues in respect of this development, and picked up some of the matters that have been raised through the structure, the plan that has been put in place for the whole of that North Essendon area. And so the structure plan talks about a certain number of height levels and so on like that, and setbacks. The issue that is most profound in this is the fact that it's a church and that needs to be preserved as a building and be able to operate in its own right and do so according to that, and consequently that's the 173 agreement, certainly in terms of bells ringing and the likes of that. The other part of this is the structure plan talks also about a height limit of 4, and what we're proposing the council do is simply impose the desired level on the structure plan. What was also missing was in the original proposal was the question of setbacks to the rear of the property and what was happening at the front. We have a very different sort of building issue here, because you could easily, if you built all totally up to the road without sufficient setbacks, you would take away a significant part of the view of that church. The notion of building churches in places like main roads is so that they can be seen, surely. The residents at the rear of this development were being asked to put up with setbacks that were of a lesser amount than appears in the structure plan because of the need to push stuff to the rear. Now that just doesn't work in the sense of what is important for those residents in the south border. So we're strictly enforcing the structure plan. We've asked it to come down to 4, and through the 173 agreement we're simply asking that the people who move in next to this church recognise that it is a church and that it is not some passive building that doesn't have a lot of people going into it, and that it is a place that is very important to many, many people in this community or outside of Moonee Valley, and it serves a very important purpose.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Would any other councillor like to speak on the item? Councillor Gauchimirici?
Very briefly, Councillor Cusack and Nation have covered the planning considerations. I just wanted to touch on the additional condition V, which was brought to my attention a couple of weeks ago. If you have a read of the Essendon Historical Society's newsletter from June-July 2016, when this building was sold, there is some fascinating history to this piece of land and to the building itself. The house was built in the late 1890s, but was the first private maternity hospital in the area and ran from 1920 to 1950-ish. So there's some really fascinating history there that we should be recognising and acknowledging.
Yeah, great, that comes in one of the conditions. Thank you. Are there any other councillors that would like to speak on this item? Councillor Marshall.
Thank you, Chair. I think this streetscape elevation, and I'm going to see if I can get this right to the camera, is very telling. So this is the existing, and this is the proposal at 5. So when you consider issues of bulk and scale, and you consider how a development can potentially impact on what is a significant building next to it, that 5th storey, I'll keep it facing this way, is one that just really does tip things over the edge. And certainly with the reduction of that 5th storey, or the deletion of it, to reduce this down to a 4-storey development, that is a much improved outcome, and certainly is more in fitting with the existing heritage building next door. The concerns that I had, the very significant concerns around the potential impacts on those properties at the rear, look, there still will be an impact and we can't deny that. But we also need to be mindful about those rules that were set out in the structure plan, and again, we know how these things play out. So sometimes you are better to condition them to mitigate those impacts as best you can, rather than just roll the dice and see what a VCAT member decides on a particular day. As well though, I mean, there is the issue of what will happen to the properties nearby, or the adjacent properties on the other side, because you can see with this particular development that it has a potential to really limit what they can do with their own properties. So That's another factor that we have to be considerate of. So I think in light of the proposed changes, the conditions, the additional ones included by Councillor Nation in the motion, I think on balance this is a pragmatic outcome, and it's certainly one that could be significantly worse. And I really like the idea of putting in the plaque, and I think it's something that we really need to do more often. And it's something, although probably now we've got Google Maps, they take photos of all these properties before they're demolished, unfortunately. But having some sort of depository or repository I should say, where we have photos of buildings over time before they're demolished, I think it would be nice to perhaps work with the Essendon Historical Society in relation to something like that. Because certainly the properties in the activity centre are at significant risk of being demolished, and it's sad to see another one go, but I think on balance, this, as I said, this is probably a pragmatic outcome, and it's certainly the impacts on the church will be significantly reduced, as will be the impacts on the properties at the rear.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Were there any other councillors that would like to speak on the item? Councillor Sorais.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have really grave concerns about the traffic impact of this proposed development. If you read in the report, item 20, that says, prior to the commencement of the use of the proposed development hereby approved, vehicle access and associated works must be provided and available for use. It must provide for A, left in and left out turning movements only, which indicates to me that people coming in and out of this premises on Buckley Street, to get to the other side of Buckley Street, are going to have to turn left onto Buckley Street, travel over the proposed whatever is happening at the Buckley Street level crossing to get around to get to the other side of Buckley Street. So perhaps I'd like some clarification before I vote on this as to the traffic impacts, because there is no rear entry or exit to this site. And I'm concerned that...
Sorry, just to confirm, Councillor Sorais, you're asking for a point of clarification in regards to the turning?
that it would only be a left in and left out. They would not be able to make a right-hand turn to cross over to the other side of Buckley Street from this premises, according to the conditions on this proposed application.
I'll hand this over to Vera. Thank you.
They're sent to us set of conditions to address all of that. Yes, it's going to be left into the Buckley Street.
So left in and left exit only. You need to put your microphone on.
It doesn't work, sorry.
Thank you. So I have really, really grave traffic concerns, given the possible impact that another 64 car spaces that's being provided for in this application, and even if you halve that to 30 extra vehicles, only being able to go to an area that's looking at being reduced to one lane, I just think it's just going to create a lot more traffic hazards, and I cannot support this application for those reasons.
Thank you, Councillor Sorais. Were there any other councillors that wanted to speak on the item? Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Just to add that the following on from Councillor Sorais's comments, the transportation is going to be a major issue also for these people that are actually buying these units, in terms of trying to head west down Buckley Street, because there'll be a trench in front of them as they enter into Buckley Street, which will prevent them going under the railway line and heading west. They'll have to actually go down to the railway line, do a U-turn, go back up to Mount Alexander Road, probably cross Mount Alexander Road in Buckley Street, to then maintain an ability to do a U-turn to come back down Buckley Street, to enter the trench to go back under the railway line. So I just hope those that are purchasing these properties are aware of the machinations and logistics that are involved in travelling from this point on Buckley Street, because it is going to be, as Councillor Sorais rightly pointed out, a great problem for the community that lives at this point. and so that's going to be extra transportation that is probably not considered when one purchases these type of properties. Let's hope they don't have to drop off their children at St Columba's or Penley or Lowther Hall, because that'll be a problem as well, of course. So it's a great issue that people who are looking at those properties. Having said that, the area is also altering in the number of units that are developing in that area. We note that there's another couple of large apartment blocks being constructed, which these Chamber has voted on previously in Russell Street, and also over the railway line on the corner of Flower, I think it is. There's a large development going on there. So it's becoming a apartment mecca, one could say, and that is a concern in itself in terms of the transport and the issues that are going on in that area. That's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Did any other councillor wish to speak on the item? No. In that case, Councillor Nation, would you like to close?
Yeah, I will, and I'll address a couple of points. Just before I do, the condition 1U, which is to delete the 5th level, will then impact condition 1C, which references the 4th and 5th levels. I believe it doesn't need a formal amendment because it's just an alteration subsequent of the new condition, but I might ask governance if that is required. So it's condition 1C, which references in the report the 4th and 5th levels to be set back.
So you would like the and 5th levels to be deleted?
Well, yeah, so condition 1U is the deletion of the 5th level, so there shouldn't be a reference to it in subsequent conditions. I think it's
you can take that as an informal alteration.
So, look, I acknowledge the differing opinions around the Chamber on this particular application. I guess this is one of the rare, and it is rare, applications within an activity centre that actually provides all the residential car spaces it's required to, except I believe a couple of visitor spaces and commercial tenancy visitor spaces. And it's something that we have sat around and debated many applications, whinging that they don't provide enough car parking, and so this is an application that comes to us with pretty much the full suite of car parking, just a small waiver. So it's hard to be critical to then say that this application could have less car parking, because I'm sure that the applicant probably would want to provide less car parking, but has actually provided the full suite. So we usually encourage applications in the activity centre to not provide the full suite because of public transport access. So I feel there tends to be criticism when the full quota is supplied, and then criticism when the full quota is not supplied. On the issue of the turning movements, I believe from the plans that as the road is at present, you actually can't do a right-out manoeuvre because you'd have to travel across a turning lane. So that actual stretch of road, if you were coming out of 95 Buckley now or in a year's time, it is just a left-only manoeuvre, and obviously a left-in as well, because there is that turning lane. So just to note that turning mechanism...
Councillor Nation, would you like an extension?
Oh, no, I'm just wrapping up, sorry. Yeah, so with all things considered, hopefully councillors can see that this is a appropriate outcome for the site with the conditions moved in the alternative.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Before I put that to the vote, I will just confirm with the seconder that you are okay with the deletion of the informal alteration of the removal of the 5th.
Mayor, it's minor, but it's absolutely consistent with the motion.
Just trying to be consistent with the meeting procedures. Oops. Thank you. Okay, so I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? All those in favour? Councillor Sharp, Councillor Nation, Councillor Marshall, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Cusack, Councillor Gauci-Marici. All those against? Councillor Sorais, Councillor Lawrence. The motion is carried. Council Report 9.2 on tonight's agenda is on page 28 and is entitled Financial Performance Report March 2018. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Nation.
I'll move a motion in the form of the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Marshall. Councillor Nation, would you like to speak on the item?
Well, it doesn't seem like anyone wants to put up their hand tonight. This is a fairly straightforward report that comes to us on the quarter, detailing variations in council's figures as opposed to budgeted amounts. This particular report notes there is a $3.2 million favourable adjustment to budgeted amounts. That is a result of an increase in stat planning fees and supplementary rate income. There's also some amounts that are unfavourable, being the unsuccessful grant funding amounts with that Shared Schools Facilities Fund, and lower revenue at Hopetown. It also, at Hopetown Children's Centre. It also notes that there's amounts of $2.9 million for the Overland Reserve Pavilion, $800,000 for East Keilor Leisure Centre, and $800,000 for Ormond Park, which will be carried over into the 18-19 financial year. This report also contains our councillor expenditure for the first quarter, which will hopefully be uploaded on the website and get that reporting back up to date as per the original notice of motion. I also would stress that it would be good for that councillor expenses to come as a separate line item for the ease of community reading and not to be buried in the financial report. Other than that, the figures are entailed within the report and the appendices, and it's a fairly straightforward procedural report.
Great, thanks, Councillor Nation. Councillor Marshall, would you like to speak on the item?
Thank you, Chair. Look, it shows fundamentally, the financial statements do, that council is in a strong financial position, which is, I think, what everyone wants to know about their council. I'd encourage people to actually read this too, because you don't have to be someone who's particularly interested in figures, but even the notes themselves tell a story. So you might want to have a look through, and you can find out a whole range of things that you mightn't otherwise know about council through doing that review. As Councillor Nation mentioned, we have the councillor expenses report. I will note there's a reference in here to saying it is for the period from 1 January to 31 March. Oh, sorry, so it's saying from July 2017 to 31 March rather than 1 January to 31 March. So they are done on a quarterly basis, so it should actually say that, just to be clear. The other things that this is really quite interesting for, if you're a community member, is also we have our grants register, and that gives you an indication of how we're tracking with our grant applications, and probably gives you an indication of how we're going with our advocacy. So as you can see, we've had a number of successful grant applications, which is always good news. A couple unsuccessful, but certainly the green is far outweighing the red, which is always a nice position. But we're in a strong financial position, and that reflects the fact that it's a council that has been financially very prudent, and long may that continue.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Would any other councillor like to speak on the item? Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Madam Deputy. Just to reiterate a few of the figures that have highlighted themselves, the revenue against budget is up 1.7 mil, which is a good result, and one that is good, and take into account that our expenditure is down 5.4 mil against budget, giving us a surplus of 6.1, I should say. However, capital grants, as Councillor Marshall pointed out, and contributions are down 1.5, leaving an overall surplus of 6.1. So that's that's a commendable result, and one that the financial gurus of the council are no doubt proud of, and so are we as councillors. I would caution, though, one particular aspect that worries me when forecasting, and that is annual forecasts are based on annual variances from previous budgets, and forecasting is a dangerous accounting practice. It does lead to misinformation that potentially could occur, and we should be very mindful that what's happened in the past is no reflection of what can happen in the future, as any share broker will tell you when investing. Other than handling the ratepayers' purse for this budget 17-18 year, it is a commendable result, so I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Would any other councillor like to speak on the item? Councillor Cusack.
Thank you, Mayor. Deputy Mayor. Accepting the caveat that Councillor Lawrence has placed on the reading of this report, I note that it is up to the 9 months at the end of March, and that it clearly indicates that in terms of the fiscal year we're travelling very well. In fact, so well that in terms of it, we have a strong position that underpins our budget that we discussed at the last council meeting, to the extent that we can forecast and undertake larger capital works projects into the future based on with some considerable confidence. We're also expending our money this year on more capital works than has ever been done in this municipality ever. So take all the historical figures and whatever you want to do, this is 2017-18 is something of a watershed year, and we know that money is going to continue to some degree. The figures for the current quarter will be some time coming through, but they're looking very positive in terms of grants and so on that have come to the council. I applaud the report also from the point of view of transparency. As Councillor Marshall has pointed out, for once now our community can quite clearly see the fruits of the advocacy of the council through its grants. But the other one, of course, is what councillors are making in terms of demands on council for its expenses, which by and large are pretty small. And I would recommend that anybody who's considering issues in relation to council have a serious look at this report and its appendices. I believe it tells generally an overall very good story and paints and shows a very sound base for future development and growth in this community.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Would any other councillor like to speak on the item? No? In that case, Councillor Nation, would you like to close? No? Okay, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 9.3 on tonight's agenda is on page 34 and is entitled Reviewing Statutory Planning Protocols. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Marshall.
Thanks, Chair. I would like to move that consideration of this report be deferred until a future ordinary council meeting, and that consultation occur with previous attendees of consultation meetings to obtain feedback on their effectiveness.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Cusack. Councillor Marshall, would you like to speak on the item?
I'll speak briefly just because I'm requesting that this be deferred, but there are a number of matters in here that are of concern to me. But one of the things that sits very uneasily with me is that we're proposing to make changes to those consultation meetings that most Wednesday nights we rock up to, and the community rock up to, and applicants rock up to discuss contentious planning applications. And we're, in this, considering amendments to that process without actually having asked the attendees, the people who rock up, what their views are and whether they think they're effective. If they don't, how they think they could be effective, or They might think that we should just get rid of them. They might think there are a whole range of things that could be done differently. But I'm loath to go down that path of changing that process, which is a long-standing process, without having actually asked people who have attended that process what they think of it. To me, that's jumping the gun. There are a number of other things in here too that I have concern about, but given this is a deferral primarily on the grounds that we require some consultation, I will leave it at that for now.
Thanks, Councillor Marshall. Noting that it's not up on the screen, do you have a copy of your motion? Councillors, is everyone clear what we're debating at the moment? Or would you need it up on the screen? Councillor Cusack, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm quite clear. I think that the proposal needs to be deferred for some further consideration, and we need to also apply some level of scrutiny to the question of how we engage with our community around the questions of development and the community's voice in questions of developments that concern them in their neighbourhoods or are very nearby and have a broader impact on the community. In particular, for instance, like the church that we just debated in 9.1. But this is not just a question of how the voice of the community operates within the question of consultation meetings. Many of our community over many years have devoted a huge amount of time and effort in attending VCAT meetings, coming faithfully into deputation meetings and the likes of that. There are residents groups that have invested a huge amount of effort into this, and we're a council that I think has been at least good, if not very good, at honouring that commitment by our members of our community. If we were to tip that balance in some way or other that doesn't meet the expectations of the community, I'd be very concerned. And we did make a change some time ago. For those who recall it, they used to be called deputations meetings. There was that notion of confrontation that was built into the word deputation that was not quite right. We also changed the trigger for a deputations meeting and lifted it up to 10 objections. But I think that while there's a lot to be said in terms of the reasons for changing these protocols and these planning protocols, and for efficient operation of the planning system and the decision making, this is one area that I would absolutely counsel on, that it needs to take seriously the opportunity to consult with the community on it. I don't know that it would necessarily have to be a long one, but we have a long list of names of people who have attended consultation meetings, for example, in the last 6 months, and it might even be simple enough to contact them. We have email addresses, etc. like that, and we could very easily go to the source and ask them. If you want to extend it further, we can do it a much deeper one as well, but I would have thought that it's a very straightforward thing. Maybe even establish something like a Survey Monkey sort of thing or whatever like that on our website would be also useful.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. I'll just give all councillors and people in the gallery just a moment. It is now up on the screen if you wanted to check the wording of that. Would anyone else like to speak on this motion?
Just some clarification, please, Deputy Mayor.
Yep.
Are we talking all the attendees? Are we talking half the attendees? Are we talking a percentage of the attendees? Could we have some clarification as to what it means?
Yep. I will just confirm with the acting CEO whether that's...
A representative sample, may I suggest? So it would be a statistically significant sample size. So we'll look at how many people have attended and determine the appropriate number. So if we can maybe put in the consultation occur with a representative sample of those that attended consultation meetings.
Over what period of time, Mr. CEO, acting?
The last 6 months?
Well, I'm happy to leave this as we usually do to the discretion of the officers to get a result which would provide assistance using
Yep.
data. I think we can do that.
Happy to take that.
So, Councillor Marshall, can you please read what's on the screen as to what the motion is
So
currently?
that consideration of this report be deferred to a future ordinary council meeting and that consultation occur with those who have with a a representative sample. Happy to put that in. Of those who have attended consultation meetings to obtain further information on their effectiveness. So I assume, just as a point of clarification, Acting CEO, that provides enough clarity to officers to go off and...
It certainly does, Councillor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Just confirming with the seconder, Councillor Cusack. Thank you. Now, would any other councillor like to speak on the item? No, in that case, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? All those in favour? Councillor Sorais, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Nation, Councillor Marshall, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Cusack, Councillor Gauci-Marici. All those against? Councillor Lawrence. The motion is... Item 9.4 on tonight's agenda is on page 45 and is entitled Council Plan 2017 to 21 Progress Report for January to March 2018. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Marshall.
Yes. Move a motion in the form of the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Cusack. Thank you. Councillor Marshall, would you like to speak on the item?
Look, I will, and I am going to speak on my particular areas in terms of my portfolio. You can see as you go through here, and the appendices have some fairly significant information about where we're tracking and how we're tracking, and we're tracking well. There are a couple of matters in relation to which we are, I think the description is off the track, but there are adequate explanations as to why that's the case. And again, as we look here, as at 31 March, 80% of actions were on track, 15% were complete, 4% were off track, and 1% were not yet scheduled to start. So if you're interested in explanations as to why, you can go through and you can find those explanations. In terms of the achievements, some of the key achievements, something very close to my heart is we've actually completed the draft developer contribution plan, and as we know, that will be something that ultimately, if we get through the long and arduous process that all planning scheme amendments are, that will help fund some of the infrastructure needs that we will have in Moonee Valley to help service the community. And it's a really important plan, and it's about that concept of actually making sure that developers pay their fair share. We've undertaken the Stage 2 works in relation to the Union Road streetscape plans, which are very exciting, and there's lots happening around Union Road at the moment, as all of us who go around there know. Certainly lots of works. We have installed nearly 100 kilowatts of solar systems, and they've been across the municipality. I think we've got Strathmore Children's Centre, Bradshaw Hall, Hopeton Children's Centre and Lincolnville Kinder. We're certainly on track with our greenings, which is wonderful news, and there is a lot of planting happening around Moonee Valley. And we really need to say a vote of thanks to our Friends of groups and other community groups who, those programs could not occur without their assistance. So we are both very lucky and very, very grateful for the assistance that they provide. I think that's probably all I'll talk about at the moment, because no doubt other councillors have things that they'd like to share, and I am mindful of the time, but we are delivering.
It's a lovely way to end it. Councillor Cusack.
This is a very satisfactory report, I think. I think there are only, as the report says, there's only really one item that we plan to get going, and it hasn't fired up yet. I suspect that, and as Councillor Marshall points out, good reasons have been offered in the report for why that has occurred. The reality is that we're now as a council juggling a huge number of projects, whether they're in capital works or in that whole overall improvement about how we do business as a council. I appreciate that community feels frustration at times that particular projects that they may have identified are not progressing just yet or whatever. The reality is that all projects are being looked at over a period of time. They are budgeted over a period of time, and we have to think about the long haul for all of these projects. The reality is also that, as I said earlier, we're spending more money on getting things done in this municipality than we've ever done before. And I think that the fruits of that will come through very, very soon. Councillor Marshall mentioned the Union Road work, and I know that other councillors will have their own pet area, things to raise in their own areas. But can I just say that a lot of people are feeling hurt in Union Road right now because they're having to dodge stones and walk in different ways and take long routes to get from one shop to another that they never had before, and getting in and out of the library is a mission impossible. However, the reality is that this will be a significant improvement to that area, and so follows a number of these projects that are all in some way developing something better in our community, whether on a small scale for just general improvements for people and the amenity, or a number of projects as per the solar power ones that have significant benefit for our community members, and the way this council achieves its goals around through strategies that it's established, whether they're in the environment, around health and well-being and the likes of that. So it's a good report. I think it's one that we should all be proud of, and that if members of the public have issues with any of the items, please feel free to raise them and have a conversation with us about it. And if there are subjects in there that you're not quite sure about, please come back to the council and talk about them, because everybody would be more than happy to answer those queries.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Would any other councillor like to speak on the item? Councillor Sorais.
Just to make a note with regards to the integrated transport, what we're continuing to work on through the progress reports of the portfolio advisory committees and the plan is that we're continuing to work on the Better Moves Around Schools program to improve safety and encourage walking and cycling around schools. So working strongly on that.
Sounds great. Would any other councillor like to speak on the item? Yes, Councillor Nation.
I just wanted to make note on a couple of other items outside Council's capital works program that been rolled out and are being rolled out and are listed in this council plan update. One of them is the Walk with Wurundjeri event that was held on the 5th of March down at the Teardrop, which has just been nominated as a Heart finalist, which is really exciting. That news came through just a couple of days after we had met with the Wurundjeri Council down at Abbotsford. And the Heart Awards are helping achieve Reconciliation Together Awards, presented by Reconciliation Victoria and the VLGA, to acknowledge Victorian initiatives that contribute to local reconciliation outcomes. The work we're doing in that space which is outlined in the objectives of the council plan and also in this update, is really exciting. And you can even see how a lot of it's transpired through to MV 2040 and the acknowledgement to the Wurundjeri people throughout that document. A couple of other points in this council plan update that I just want to mention. One's the Healthy Ageing Mobile Office, which is doing the rounds, shopping centres and GP clinics, and that's providing information to our ageing community. It's mobile, it's going around to see them, so people don't have to come to us. The other was our community funding program review, which is another part of our council plan, which is gradually getting developed and evolving, and I think we're getting close to getting a model that caters for all different groups in our community, and hopefully we can tie that community funding model in with our MV 2040, either neighbourhoods or the key themes of our council plan, to really create that thorough funding model for all parts of our community. So.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Would any other councillor like to speak on the item? No. Councillor Marshall, would you like to close? No. In that case, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 9.5 on tonight's agenda is on page 47 and is entitled Progress Report on Portfolio Advisory Committees. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor
Move the recommendation of the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Soares. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Lawrence. Councillor Soares, would you like to speak on the item?
Yes, look, I'll just speak on the pack that I'm involved with, and that's 1F, the Integrated Transport Pack. Although I was not present at that meeting, I was an apology. I think I was on leave for some reason. I have followed up and got some notes that I'd like to address with the council. So the committee members explored on how the integrated transport plan could include reduced speed limits throughout the municipality, so that's an ongoing implementation. The Essendon Fields shuttle bus, so that's a combined stakeholder advocacy group of PTV, Essendon Fields and Moonee Valley Council. The improving of planting and amenities along the Moonee Ponds Creek shared path, example Travancore Park, is something that we could refer to for an example. And we looked at the 80 Cities Designer City for 8-year-olds and 80-year-olds, which is a design philosophy for consideration in progress. So that's quite an exciting thing. You've got two extremes of different ends of our age groups, and that would be quite an interesting thing to see in the long term. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Soares. Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Look, I think the PACs, as they're known as, the Portfolio Advisory Committees, have some good and bad aspects to them. We probably need to inject an essence of new blood into them. I don't think that's the fault of anybody in particular, just that they've lost a bit of their momentum. In some PACs, not all of them, I might add. I personally have found the business promotions to be a very good PAC, and one that we've got a lot of benefit from. A couple of aspects that have come out of them include the space in libraries, the Acorn system that's at the Sam Merrifield Library for small business operators to utilise the facilities there. A great initiative that has come out of the PAC. Secondly, the Procurement Supplier Forum, which I was fortunate enough to attend, and what a great initiative that was, that just came out of discussions between procurement and the EcoDev area, as well as ourselves on the PAC, that saw within a day we saw businesses that came out of the woodwork wanting to attend this procurement forum, and we had a packed clock tower just to find out what council does and how they go about their procurement process. So these are the sort of initiatives that have come out of my PAC alone. I don't know everybody's PAC. Each councillor has their own individual notations that are either positive or negative. I'm not sure, but hopefully they've been positive. We do need a slight injection of more community involvement, and I don't think that's a bad thing. And those that are out there in viewer land listening to this council broadcast would maybe consider taking a role in any of the packs, because I'm sure if you put your hand up that councillors and the council officers would be only too willing to listen to your advice and consider taking you on one of the pack committees. So I'll just leave it at that. I think there's room for improvement, and these are only our honeymoon days on this. It's not been going that long, so I think we just need to sit down and rework it again. I think the report is good, gives a background to everything, and I think councillors, I can recommend it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Would anyone else like to speak on this item? Councillor Gauchimarici.
Thank you. I am conscious that due to the timing of the Future Communities Pack, we won't have an update in here. So given the minutes aren't confirmed, I just wanted to let everyone know what Future Communities have done in their last meeting. We have 10 fantastic members, so we certainly welcome other members, but they are a really active group, and we're really lucky to have them. But at the meeting on the 30th of April that we had, we discussed the release of the Moonee Valley 2040 strategy, on which feedback is still open, so follow the link on our website to give your feedback. We discussed affordable housing, post-war heritage, and the links to the local planning framework rewrite with the 2040 strategy. But we also discussed a new and exciting 20-minute neighbourhood pilot project in Strathmore, which you can also provide some input on. We'd love to hear from community members about interesting people and places, which will then go into an exhibition. So if there is some good stories you have around Strathmore neighbourhood, we would really appreciate hearing them. One of the stories that was mentioned at the PAC meeting by Andrew was a velodrome which operated between the 20s and the 50s on Talbot Road, which I had no idea about. So that was a really cool little piece of history. And if you want to submit some stories about Strathmore people or places, the link is on my Facebook page, our website, or you can complete a postcard at the Corner Cafe on Woodland Street. So we would love to hear from you about our neighbourhood pilot project.
That sounds great. Thanks, Councillor Gauchimarici. Would any other councillor like to speak on the item? Councillor Cusack.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just a quick reflection, I suppose in the broad first of all, is that when the packs were proposed going back just a little bit more than a year ago, it was conceived that we needed to have another part to how council operates, and that notion of participative democracy needs to be lifted. We do some consultation with community on certain matters and so on like that, and we do extensive consultation on other ones. But that notion of having a consistent way of community and leaders in our community being able to input on vital matters is something that we have not necessarily done well in the past. So while there might be some consideration about the packs not being perfect, that's fine, because we're only just starting and the whole thing is evolving. And it's also a case of some areas lend more to the pack structure as it is now, and others will change quite dramatically. Some can only really operate really effectively when there's a great big group and it's all together. Others might, as I said, work better in smaller groups. But just reflecting for a second on the work of the Community and Wellbeing Portfolio Advisory Committee, first of all, it's been an energetic and very keen committee. It's met a number of times already, well beyond the expectation of what was proposed initially, and I must dip my lid to the officers who have been prepared to go along with what the community representatives have asked to be able to do. And that's a terrific reflection on the commitment that both sides of the the coin are making to this. But to look at things like the welfare and well-being of the mental health of young people in our community, and to actually sit down and start talking about that as a serious thing. To talk about how jobs can be created that are meaningful and long-lasting jobs, and how people can access that world and so on. We haven't had the conversations with the business economics area, but it does throw up the issue that this community wellbeing Portfolio Advisory Committee is in fact influenced by and can influence the way all of our Portfolio Advisory Committees work. Final thing I want to say, with 20 seconds left to go, is that we had a fabulous joint meeting with Council of Nations PAC on the inclusion, diversity, equity and access area, and it was the liveliest, most wonderful debate and conversation and ideas being thrown up that people are grabbing hold of and really wanting to run with. And I want to echo the thoughts of fellow councillors previous to me, that it's a great opportunity for people who would like to contact a councillor and talk about maybe an opportunity to be involved in the Portfolio Advisory Committees, or how they might contribute to those, even if it's only on a casual basis, and feed something up. It'd be most welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Would any other councillor like to speak on the item? Councillor Marshall.
Thanks, Chair. Look, I echo the sentiments of councillors in terms of the importance of having that input in a format. The review process will be interesting because obviously, given the amount of time that our community members are dedicating to being involved in the PACs, reading material, thinking about the issues and attending, you want to make sure that they feel that they're getting value out of it too. Because I think all of us sitting around here are not arrogant enough to think that we know all the answers. And that's what I love about the PACs, that the ideas that come out of them are just so, well, they're invigorating, they're innovative. We've got people who have such knowledge and understanding of their particular areas of interest that if we were to be billed for the knowledge and expertise that they are giving us, it would be a very expensive bill. So we are incredibly fortunate that we have these contributions from our community members. I know our the Enviro one, so the people who are on there, they put me to shame in terms of their knowledge and their skills and credentials in the Enviro area, and the issues that they have raised have been incredibly valuable to our council officers and to councillors. They've made a submission too, which is great, and I know we'll continue to come up with a whole range of really important discussions that will certainly generate lots of thought and discussion around these important issues. The strategic planning, again, I would say the same. We have some incredibly well-credentialed people on there who understand strategic planning and understand that that is where you win or lose your planning battles. And I'm really looking forward, given what we have to deal with in the next 12 to 18 months from a strategic planning perspective, to see, and we'll continue to encourage their input. So, look, I think I agree with Councillor Cusack. We can't just be fixed about how these work, and as we go along there might be things that need to evolve and need to change to make sure that we are all getting maximum value out of them, and that's really important. But certainly today they have been incredibly valuable. And I just want to thank from the bottom of my heart all the people who are rocking up to them and putting in such time and just volunteering to help our municipality become a better place.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Would any other councillor like to speak on the item? No, I might just say a couple of quick words. Just in response to Councillor Lawrence and Councillor Cusack, in terms of people contacting to join PACs and whatnot, there was obviously an extensive application process for people to get on in the first place. So I'm just mindful that, you know, people can obviously contact us, but then there would be a process, and I don't think we've actually decided on that process yet in terms of changing the PACs. The last PAC group that I was on was with actually Councillor Sypek. The sport and leisure portfolios merged for the time because we were talking about the leisure centre, which is obviously the biggest capital works project that we have in this municipality. So it was quite relevant at the time. But I will pass on to Councillor Sorais if you would like to close.
Thank you. Just writing down a few notes here. Thank you, Madam Chair. If you look at page 48 on the report, it says about those major issues and projects that have been discussed by the PACs. And I also note that the community wellbeing and future community PACs are still yet to finalise their terms of reference. Can I just get a response as to whether that has taken place to date? Or could I have that followed through and we get a generic email?
We can
to
take that on
council?
notice, Councillor, and follow up.
Thank you, thank you. I also note in the report, and everyone has made a valid contribution to this item, on pages 146 and 147, there are 2 pages that have come out of the 2040 proposal from the community and this is particularly from the transport group. So things like reallocation of space away from on-street parking, higher frequency public transport, particularly at off-peak times, including evening services on the 59, which currently experiences overcrowdings after 8:30. But it's interesting to note the underground rail to eliminate, I think it should be Holmes Street. It's got that in brackets, level crossing. So obviously some of these issues are vitally important for the future up to 2040 of our municipality. Councillor Cusack touched on the welfare and well-being and the health and safety of the young in our community. And you're absolutely spot on, Councillor Cusack, because every child in our municipality has the right to feel safe and to be happy in an environment and the community that they live in. And as Councillor Marshall pointed out, the importance of the input being put forward from these wonderful people in our community that have contributed to these groups has been overwhelming and certainly taken on board. And I think it is vitally important that we do listen to our community and what they have put in and that we support them wherever possible. So just a big tick all around, I guess, on this whole project and the fact that we are engaging with our community and we're getting all this information and as well as us being the voices of that community, so are they on another level across, and we all come to hopefully a cohesive solution at the end of it all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sorais. I will put that motion to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 9.6 on tonight's agenda is on page 51 and is entitled Response to Notice of Motion 2017-27- Interim and Permanent Heritage Controls 148 Ascot Vale Road, Flemington. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Marshall.
I'd like to move a motion in the form of the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Do I have someone to second? Councillor Cusack. Councillor Marshall, would you like to speak on the item?
Well, there are some council reports that it is an absolute delight to read, and this would be one of them. As councillors will no doubt recall, Chair, I put forward a notice of motion in December, and councillors was very appreciative for the unanimous support of councillors to actually explore the heritage significance of this magnificent property. And you can read the heritage report, and it is a fabulous read, it really is, because it talks not only about the physical part of the building and the fact that it still has such great integrity and intactness, which is obviously from a heritage perspective incredibly important, but it also goes through the history. It has original drawings that have been provided by family members, and that's one of the things I loved about this. You've got photos of the property at various stages. It's really, it's just a great report, and I'm very pleased, obviously, that that the heritage experts engaged by council to provide the report came to the view that this is a dwelling that is of local historic significance. So from a process point of view, this is basically now going to the Minister saying, can we have interim heritage controls for this site while we go through the process to get permanent controls. You can see, obviously, that there is an intention or a desire from the owners of the property to demolish it and to put on a number of dwellings. So with the way that this process works, as people will be aware, if there are unresolved submissions, then it will end up at a panel, and the panel will do what panels do, which is make recommendations in relation to the property. But certainly when you read the citation, you read the supporting material, this is a home that has significant heritage value. It's in great shape, has had minor modifications, which again is all the stuff that you're looking at when you're trying to work out whether a property is going to meet the threshold for having heritage controls. So if you have even a passing interest in the history of the area, then read the report. It'll be great. I won't bore everyone with tales of power without glory, which is what I did last time. You can just watch the live stream recording. But I certainly do thank the Flemington Heritage Group again for bringing this to the attention of the broader community, and thank councillors for their support in relation to the original motion and hopefully for this one too.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Councillor Cusack.
It can't be understated what a debt we owe to Councillor Marshall for bringing that motion to this council in the first place, and that this is we're now in receipt of a report that clearly demonstrates that for whatever reason we slipped as a council in not covering this particular property in our original work. However, we've now got the evidence in front of us about why this should stay. This property is not only of interest, but is highly contributive to the whole of that area. So, as a council as one, we should really be very strongly resolved around this particular motion, that this is without doubt an important piece of work that has been done. We should be driving straight through to the Minister's office as quickly as we possibly can and encouraging the Minister to move as rapidly as we can. There is a great deal to be achieved by preserving properties like this, and as I said before, while we have worked very, very hard over some years now and through the previous council to this one to start identifying seriously that sweep of properties that are in this neighbourhood, in our community, that are truly worthy of heritage overlays and being recognised, we have and are prone to making mistakes. So again, I really encourage the community, if you are aware or you live in a place that is of some significance and you have a concern, why not call your councillor or your council and have a conversation about it and then start this ball rolling. It may not amount to much, so I don't want to overpromise anything, but on the other hand, it's probably always worthwhile doing. Noting also that we have a tree register for the same purposes. So I'll leave it at that, but again, well done, Councillor Marshall. Well done to the officers for turning this ship around, and thank goodness we got a really interesting report from Frontier Heritage.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Would any other councillor like to speak on the motion? Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I will just quickly, to flag that I'm very supportive of this motion. Anything to do with heritage, I'm always, quite happy to support. I would just like to echo Councillor Cusack's comments, because my only concern is this wasn't. We've been working so hard over the last however many years to make sure that we've covered off on very important buildings in this municipality and have them protected. But to see one that is missed does concern me. So thank you, Councillor Cusack, because I was going to say the same thing. Just let us know if there's a building that you think is significant. Please let us know, because there may well be a few that are missed. And congratulations to Councillor Marshall for getting this up and getting this protected, because we need to continue the fight to make sure our heritage is protected. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Would any other councillor like to speak on this item? Councillor Sorais.
I just have a question. It's not about speaking so much. It's just a question with regards to item 3 of financial. It just says the planning scheme amendment.
Sorry, Councillor Sorais, is this a point of clarification?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
So it says under financial, the planning scheme amendment will require funding in the 2017-18 and 2018-19 financial years and be funded from Council's strategic planning operational budget. Could we have an email sent around with the costings on what the outcome is?
We're happy to do that, Councillor.
Thank you.
Thank you. Would any other... Councillor Sorais, were you going to speak on the item or you just wanted that point of clarification? Okay. Would any other councillor like to speak on the item? No? In that case, Councillor Marshall, would you like to close?
Thanks, Chair. I will. And I've referred to the information that was provided to us by family members, and I should have named them. So Michelle Booth and Bob Collins, thank you very much. And I have to say, I think this is my favourite part of the report, which is an excerpt of the original contract for the construction. So, yes, so 1915. And it has the elevations and information in relation to the proprietors, and as I said, it makes great reading for anyone who has the slightest bit of interest in the history of the area. Obviously, Councillor Sorais has raised the issue of cost, which of course is important, and it's why we need to get the rest of our heritage work done as a matter of absolute urgency. And as I've said before, it should have been done years ago, but we are doing it now. And it's certainly one of those areas where absolutely our community expect us to spend the money to protect these properties. So, councillors, I hope you see fit to support this particular motion, and we can go down and continue the process.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? And all those abstaining? Okay, all those in favour? Councillor Sharp, Councillor Nation, Councillor Marshall, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Cusack, Councillor Gauchi-Murici, Councillor Lawrence. All those against? And all those abstaining? Councillor Sorais. The motion is carried. Item 9.7 on tonight's agenda is on page 65 and is entitled Response to Urgent Business, the 24th of April FIFA World Cup. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Sharp.
Happy to move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Sorais. Councillor Sharp, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Byrne. Look, this is an idea that must be noted as come from yourself, Councillor Byrne. So congratulations on bringing this to us via a notice of motion at an urgent business item at last council meeting, actually. So thank you for bringing that to us. I think that we do a lot of talk about how to invigorate our suburbs, how to do things differently. There's no doubt that we've tried a few different things over the past years. Some have worked, some haven't. But we've never tried anything to this degree, and certainly never tried anything to do with the live screening of the FIFA Cup. I might get the terminology wrong because I'm not into soccer that much, or any other sport really, but I wouldn't be broadcasting that. But I'm quite happy to support it because I think that we do need to try different things. Although there's one thing that I'd just like to flag, and that is that I know Windy Hill is noted, and it's in Buckley Ward, but just flying the flag for Buckley Ward. Windy Hill is a good location potentially, but it is a bit isolated, not within a residential area or an area with many traders, particularly that are open at night. So the first idea that was flagged by yourself, actually, Councillor Byrne, was Leake Street or Lincoln Park, which I think are both great alternatives. So I don't know if potentially those ideas could come back on the table, even as an alternative to Windy Hill, just because I think that it's been pretty much spread around all wards, and I'd certainly like to see, like if it did go further than the first time, I'd like to see Buckley Ward certainly getting involved, because there's no doubt that there'd be a lot of people interested in something like this. So I'll wait to hear what other councillors say, but I'll leave it there for now. Thank you.
So I'm just reading the motion that you've moved. So point 2 endorses the public screening at the Centreway. For the purposes, it just says for example, so I don't think it actually locks in terms of it would be at Windy Hill, so I don't believe there would have to be a change to the motion, but I'll clarify with governance. It's just for example.
It's an option.
So you're happy, Councillor Sharp, moving the motion as read?
Yeah, I just wanted to have it on record that
Absolutely.
another venue in Buckley Ward would be appreciated.
Yep.
It's not
Okay. Councillor Sorais, would you like to speak on the item?
Yes, I will. Thank you, Councillor Byrne. And whilst I wasn't at the meeting on the 24th of April where you raised this, I'm happy to second the recommendation that's been put forward, because I have had discussions with both yourself and the Mayor in relation to this proposal, and I think it's a great thing that we engage with our community again, and we endorse something that's going to be of benefit and activated through our municipality, and nice to have it in the Rosehill ward. I actually attended the Valley Vibe, which was held at Rosehill Park, and what a sensational outcome that was. And I was there with my granddaughter, and there was some entertainers, and they had lots of sporting equipment and activities, a couple of little food trucks. But the conversations I was hearing at that were from the mums and their kids, and saying, oh yes, I heard through my friend's mum their kids go to St Peter's, etc. And this is a great thing the council are doing. I hope they do a lot more of it. So here we are, a couple of weeks later, with a lovely proposal to have, or to host the FIFA, and I'm pretty sure that my kids, even though they're big kids, will probably be attending something like this. And of course to share that around. If you look at the other venues that we're looking at, this is a pilot. This is a trial to see how it runs, how it goes. Hopefully it will be very successful, and I'm pretty sure it would be. We have a huge ethnic community and a large soccer followers within our ward in particular. And we do have a lot of soccer clubs within the municipality. So congratulations to you for raising this, and I support the motion as moved by Councillor Sharp, and I think that this is hopefully a win-win for everyone across the municipality. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Councillor Sorais. Would any other councillor like to speak on the item? Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Unlike Councillor Sharp, I'm a bit of a sporting tragic, and it doesn't really matter whether it's two flies going up the wall. I'll be happy to watch them. However, that's not what I'm here to discuss. The cost of this project does concern myself, and the $17,700 estimate that could blow out because it doesn't include any contingencies really need to be accounted for. And only because that if we only get 1,000 people at the initial viewing of the World Cup FIFA, then we're virtually charging the ratepayer $177 per person to come and watch a soccer game. So and that's putting it into dollar terms. So having said that, and it is expensive if we only get 1,000 people in the East Keeler precinct, and given that it is in winter and that it could be cold, it could be wet, and so forth, numbers could be low, and that concerns me. So having said that, I would like to see that potentially on top of this review and report, that we look at maybe a sponsor or even someone to advertise to back it, and it could be a local real estate agent, it could be Telstra, it could be whoever. I'm not using anybody in particular. I'm just suggesting that we could have a local organisation that could sponsor it. So, and that would bring the cost down, and it could be for all three, if we're having three. The other aspect is that I'm just following up from Councillor Sharp's comment regarding Windy Hill, and that is that Buckley Ward's only getting the quarter-final, and when I say only, we've got to make it, and the chances of that, I hate to say it, are slightly on the slim side, given that we've only got France and Peru and Denmark in our division. Our chances of getting through to the quarterfinals are going to be pretty slim, and so again, Buckley Ward could ultimately miss out on an Australian game in our ward, and that's a concern for us. Very patriotic Buckley Ward councillors. So, and I take her point that Windy Hill is probably not the most. It might be suitable, but it's probably not the best venue in terms of business promotion for local traders in the area, and that Leake Street and around Lincoln Park may be a far better option for our. For our local Buckley Ward people. So anyway, I think I've done my calculations wrong here.
Yes,
1,000 people, maybe I was thinking of 100 people. I think I was rather than 1,000. So if it is 1,000, I hope it is, then it's only $17.70 per person. So I'll just make that clarification. And it's still a risk that we take in the dead of winter. FIFA is the most watched sporting event in the world.
Councillor Lawrence, would you like an extension of time?
I'll have a small extension, thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Yes, it is an important one, and it'll be terrific in that first match. I'm not sure whether we play Peru or Denmark.
France.
Is it France? Thank you. It wasn't listed in the report. So, but anyway, I hope it's successful. I applaud the initiative, and it'll certainly be good for the traders and those that are in and around East Keilor and so forth. So it's just a cost issue that is a concern, and I'm sure we can find somebody to back it in terms of the private enterprise. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Councillor Gauci-Berici.
Thank you. I guess for me, I see both sides of this one, noting the feedback around the costs. For me, this is potentially $60,000 for 3 events that has come out of the blue, but then the other part of me says that I'm really, really a huge advocate for community events and activating our open spaces. There's part of me that says, will we get 100 people there if the weather's inclement, or is Windy Hill the only place that could hold 1,000 if we got 1,000 for the quarterfinal? So for me, I will be really interested to see how the first event goes. Costs aside, I have some other concerns around a number of venues that we've suggested that we haven't confirmed availability and things with, particularly given several of them are Ascot Lot, for example, or Windy Hill are private venues, and my read of the report says they haven't been checked for dates, and there's some other big contingencies around what time that quarterfinal might be scheduled and whether it's feasible at all, because we may get far less numbers if it's at 3 o'clock in the morning or something, slightly unsociable on a Tuesday night or something. Thursday night's the other one. But so I am tentatively happy to support the first pilot one, but I really want to be optimistic about it going amazingly well to justify the others, because I have some real concerns otherwise about whether it's value for money otherwise. So,
thank you, Councillor Gauci-Berici. Would anyone else like to speak? Councillor Cusack.
Worked properly, this could be quite a windfall for our retailers and for energising our neighbourhoods, and the areas that that have been selected, by and large, have that opportunity. Can I just say that as a councillor from the Moonee ward, I would never countenance the project being done at the Ascot Lodge. Not a lot, not by a long way. So you can put a big line through that one, as far as I'm concerned. However, on the other side of the fence, Pridham Plaza just lends itself so perfectly to this sort of thing. We've sat around forever and a day talking about how do you use Pridham Plaza, and this is what it was built for. This is exactly the purpose of the whole blasted thing. And to have it 10 o'clock on a Thursday night when the restaurant strip of Racecourse Road is doing big business, and to actually add a honeypot to that area of a game that is Australia versus Denmark, I reckon would go off well. Now, people talk about the weather, and I agree with you, Councillor Lawrence, it could be an issue, but I reckon that the people down in Flemington are made of sterner stuff, and it wouldn't be just a bit of cold that would take them away out of this. I would have thought that we should be thinking seriously about not worrying about too much furniture and a whole lot of things like that. Stick in a few heaters, maybe buy a bag of blankets or two, and then give the blankets away to the homeless afterwards. And people will kick for that, and everybody can go to the local restaurant. The bloke next door, the dumpling shop, he'll go off his face. He'll do more business than you can ever poke a stick at. And so too, anybody who's got kebabs or any of the African restaurants up and down Racecourse Road, I think there's a real possibility. Now, whether it'll fall on its face and whether it adds up financially is a bit of a thing. But in some ways, and people have already expressed it, this is the first time, and you don't necessarily... Why? I mean, I spend all my time telling my children when they were little kids, don't generalise from one event. You can't do it. You've got to start building up a few things, and you've got to actually have a bit of... be able to take a little bit of risk in order to be able to find out if something works. And it may need a slightly different ingredients to make it work up in East Keilor versus what might happen down in Essendon versus what might happen in Flemington. But shouldn't we be trying to find these things out? And and for something like this, it's worth a go. I'm sure that without much pain, the traders in Racecourse Road would happily carry flyers in their front windows and do all that sort of stuff. We could get free advertising left, right and centre through the traders group there. They'd be up for it.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Would any other councillor like to speak on this item? Councillor Nation.
Thank you, Mayor, Acting Mayor. I'll be the party pooper, and it's not because I disagree with the concept. I think the concept's great. I have some very fond memories of sitting in the public square in Prague, the old town square, watching the 2010 World Cup. Oh, I don't have actually that many memories at all, but that's how enjoyable it was. And I like the coming together of the community and the sharing of the world game. That said, that was in the middle of a European summer and not at the start or middle of a Melbourne winter. The costs outlined, or the estimated costings outlined, give me rise for concern, and they do because, as Councillor Cusack has mentioned, this is not the most complex concept, and I wonder if maybe we're overthinking, some of the dynamics, like the provision of everyone having a beanbag or so forth. I think a stripped back version where, as you said, a few heaters, bring your own chair, people might stand. We've got toilet facilities, Centreway or Pridham Plaza, wherever you may have it. How many more do we need to bring in for an event that's only going to last an hour and 45 minutes or an hour and 50 minutes, including the half-time break? So the cost of $17,700 which would be $200 a minute, or as Councillor Lawrence said, you get 50 people there, $374 a person, which would get you halfway to Russia, or maybe 2/3 of the way. That is my concern. We also have to be very careful about sponsorship, because we actually can't, under the public or the public viewing FIFA's public viewing policy, actually have sponsors or even a supplier of a service. That's quite clearly outlined in the appendix. And FIFA, obviously a lot of companies pay a lot of money to sponsor the World Cup, so they're very protective of that element. As I said, concept I like. I think it's a great event that once every 4 years, pending Australia's qualification, we get together and have done so since 2006, Councillor Byrne? Yeah, 2006. But yeah, I'm just really apprehensive at $17,700 for one event, particularly when you compare it to what that Department of Council invests on public art and public exhibitions. It sort of is a fairly large expense.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Would any other councillor like to speak? Councillor Marshall.
I like good ideas, and this is a good idea. So I am happy to support it on the basis that we are trying to look at how we celebrate events in our neighbourhood. And this is pretty much a fabulous example of how we can do that. I again share the concerns expressed by the councillors about the costs, and would hope we should just get rid of the beanbags. Lovely in theory, but when you're looking at the additional costs, and I keep on thinking too, when you've got a family of 7, trying to find 7 beanbags in a row, it's an absolute pain in the behind. So I agree, rock up with your blankets. We've all been to these sorts of events where you take your Bunnings chairs, or whatever it is, and you just rock up there. We can really have a great event. The traders need to get involved, and I really hope that they will, wherever it is. And I think to the extent that we can pare back the budget, so if we get rid of the added extras, the nice to haves but really don't need to have, and look at this issue with toilets, because I think as we have thought about, there are lots of events we hold where you have lots of people along and we just rely on the existing infrastructure. So I would hope that we can do that here. And to the extent that we can pare back that budget, I think that would be fabulous. And I certainly support the views of Councillor Cusack in relation to the Ascot lot not being the right place in our part of the world to have an event like this, and think Pridham would be great. And also strongly support to what Councillor Sharp said in relation to Buckley. I mean, the Leake Street or Lincoln Park just seems like the obvious place. Again, if we're trying to look at maximum benefit, close to residential, lots of opportunities for good spaces that are easily accessible, and you've got your traders who can get in on it and hopefully reap some of the benefit too. So I did, as a point of clarification, Chair, wanted to work out, in terms of updating us, what officers will be proposing to do, because certainly if we should happen to find that the first event gets 5 people and costs us $25,000, we wouldn't obviously want to continue, so would be grateful for the clarification regarding that.
I think, as Councillor Cusack said, we need to run the first one and see what the costs are. Certainly, Council can look to reduce the costs wherever possible, and if it is going to run over that number, come back to Council with some further information. But we really need to run the first one to see exactly what it does cost, because we're not experienced in running these sorts of events.
All right, thank you. And can I actually say, though, it is nice to see a situation where we are asking for council approval rather than spending and then asking for council approval. So thank you for that.
And thank you, Councillor Marshall.
Councillor Byrne, sorry, can I just ask a point of clarification? Obviously, the event's quite timely. We're endorsing the spend up to $17,000. Now, the period in between Game 1 and Game 2 for Australia is 5 days. So through you, to the CEO, but through you, how would we then resolve to spend a further amount on the second game when council would not meet in the interim between game 1 and 2.
I might throw that question to Natalie.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, so this resolution covers that additional expense. What we would do is provide a councillor update on the day after the event, saying how much it cost, how many people attended, and seek feedback on a willingness or agreement to go ahead with the next event. This resolution covers the expenditure.
Did you have a point of clarification?
Yes, could I please offer a point of clarification, because I was just thinking about that precise item actually. And obviously, as you just mentioned, the time frame is very short, 5 days. So could in point 2 we add, and this may alleviate some issues that other councillors have.
Councillor Sharp, is this going to be an informal alteration, or is it going to be a formal amendment?
Probably informal.
Okay.
But
well, maybe say it and we'll check with governance, and then we can see, as you were the mover, so if it's a formal amendment.
Yeah, point 2 endorses the public screening at Centreway Plaza as a pilot project for the purpose of assessing the event's success and identifying further opportunities for public broadcasts of events throughout the city, subject to discussions with councillors, for example. Da, da, da.
I think that's probably implied, but I think it's worth putting in there to clarify.
I think, Councillor, that goes back to the question that was just asked. Trying to get a discussion with councillors in the 5 days between the first event and the second event with no council meeting scheduled would be impractical. So if you wanted to put in a point where beyond those first 2, where we have a larger lead time for the third event, then it's possible to bring it back.
Just by email, sorry.
But if the message is to come back to councillors and advise you of the success and of our intention to continue, that's fine. If the council wishes to have a discussion and debate the merits of going with the second one, then we would need to convene a special meeting of council in order for that to happen.
Yeah, no, my point wasn't. It was mainly just to, I guess, clarify what Mr. Reader just said by just putting in there subject to discussion with councillors. So if we get an update a couple of days after, like on the Monday following, then at least we've got a couple of days to garner feedback from councillors.
That's fine.
So, Councillor Sharp, would you like that updated on the screen?
If that's okay, just insert subject to discussion with councillors.
Could I just clarify, Councillor Sharp? Are you looking to have the possibility of the second one cancelled should it not be successful, the first one? Is that what
if
we're
we only
leaning to?
get 5 people, you probably wouldn't want to do the second one.
Could I just clarify then that the broadcasting equipment has to be pre-booked and paid for? I'm imagining 5 days is a fairly small window of opportunity to cancel.
I will confirm that with the councillors. My understanding is that we'll have to book it late and do the promotion late because of the position that we're taking. So we'll provide that update to councillors once I've had another look at it.
That's a good point, though. The time frame is very difficult on this one.
It certainly is. I'm just making sure we're getting the motion so we all know what we're voting on. Is it as reads or purpose? So endorses the public screening at Centreway Plaza as a pilot project for the purpose of assessing the council's events success and identifying further opportunities for public broadcasts of events throughout the city, for example. So there.
Throughout the city, subject to discussion with councillors.
And just through governance, that's okay to have. Yes, and I just need to confirm that that's okay with you, Councillor Soares as the seconder to move as an informal amendment. Yes, Councillor
I'd just like
Cusack.
to do a point of order. I agree with your sentiment, Councillor Sharp, but wouldn't it be more logical to put an extension to 3A? Yeah. The first event be considered successful and a consultation with councillors occur at that time, because what it's saying is that endorses a spend of up to 17,000, blah blah blah, and the first event for, and subsequent events for, subsequent amounts for, should it be successful. So it's at that point, 3A, that we are trying to say, bring all of the threads together. What constitutes success? Whether it has been financially successful, whether it's had a crowd, whether the weather intervened, but it could have been a much better thing, etc., etc. And I would have thought that it would be that subject to, and so the first event be considered successful, including feedback or discussion with councillors.
Thanks, Councillor Cusack. Councillor Sharp, would you take that as moving that down instead of your informal amendment up there to move the informal amendment down to 3A?
The result is the same, so I don't think that's not a drama. That's not a problem. No.
Councillor Sorais? Cusack, you're happy with that point of order?
I did want to make the suggestion on the basis that that's exactly what that point 3 is trying to get at, and to expand out 3A to do that.
As a point of clarification, I understood that you were suggesting that subject to should be at the start of point 3. So it should say subject to.
Well,
where were you suggesting
no,
it be put? Because not, it was
Councillors
said after 3A.
after 3A. Right, okay.
Councillors, we'll leave this with Councillor Sharp in terms of what type of informal amendment you would like to make, and then if we get it seconded, and if not...
Well, we need it to make sense, though.
The way that is reading to me says that we're endorsing this event for the first event and each of the subsequent events based on the success of the first event. Correct. In point 3A. So basically, if the first event is successful, the second event will roll on as per this.
Okay, Councillor Sharp, can you just reread that word for word as you want it, and we can have that typed into the screen?
No, that's okay.
Yeah.
Is this?
I'm happy with that.
It's all contingent on the release of
Okay.
money, which is the third point.
Oh, Councillor Sharp, you're happy with that, and Councillor Sorais, you're happy with that.
Yeah, I know.
I think we got those points of order, points of clarification. Now,
Sorry,
no.
Chair. Can I suggest that there is also a mention, because that Australia be playing in the match at a suitable time, because that motion up there would lock us in if we have a 4 a.m. game. There's no reference, so there's reference to it being successful and Australia be playing in the match, but there's no reference if that game's at 3 a.m. That
Okay.
yes.
So can I clarify? That perhaps the subject to a discussion with councillors needs to go after the words for the first event. So endorses a spend of up to $17,000 for the first event, and subject to discussion with councillors 17 for each of the 2 subsequent events, and then we'll need to consider in that discussion if we look at the first event being successful, because or else the first one might be successful, the second one might be a dud. So what do we do with the third? So that leaves it open.
And then,
Yeah. I think
Just
as long as we understand the officers, is that your intention, Councillor Sharp? That was what your intended motion is. So we don't want to be.
can I just ask for clarification? Do we know what time the first match is?
8
It
o'clock.
has been confirmed. Yes.
Yes. Okay, councillors.
Yes.
Councillors,
Yes, it should.
need to get back to where we are. Now, point 3... Oh, sorry, my mic's off. Point 3 to read, Councillor Marshall, as we're still in informal amendments, or are you moving informal amendment, or are you moving a formal amendment?
No, I was suggesting that Councillor Sharp's formal amendment or informal amendment may perhaps be best reflected by this drafting. You happy with that, Nora?
But just on that, is how I read that is that the further events will be contingent on. Well, I suppose it doesn't matter how they're set.
Okay, Councillor Sharp, are you okay with as it reads?
it doesn't mean we have to come back to a council meeting by having that,
No.
No.
that written like that? Okay.
As the mover, are you happy with as it reads?
Do we need to adjourn the meeting to clarify the... Are you happy with it?
No, it should be okay. I suppose I'm also just considering the 3 a.m. potential as well. So if
Okay.
it comes back to discussion, then we can
If
discuss
it's
that.
coming back to
Yep.
the discussion as written. Councillor Sorais, are you okay with this? Okay. As the motions are put, we'll have it as that. Now, I was going to say that I'll be the last speaker on this, but I have just noticed that our mayor has come back into the chamber.
I'm happy to.
Councillor Sypek, would you like to speak on the item, knowing you've just hopped off a plane?
No, nothing. That's fine.
All right. I am just going to quickly just touch on this as it was brought up as obviously urgent business last time, and I do thank you for the overwhelming support. I understand the budget size of this, absolutely, but it's known as the World Game. It's such a multicultural game, and I think that this can really hit tick a few big boxes for us. The other thing that hasn't been mentioned is in Moonee Valley and in a lot of places in Victoria, we do have a problem with disengaged youths. This is an event that can really capture some youths. We don't have many, and this is, kids can absolutely come along, but we might actually get some really good activation with some of the teenagers that as council we probably don't do, not from a lack of trying, but we don't often hit the mark. So I think we've got some positives there. The eco-dev side of things, I'm sure that the East Pantry and Class 90 will be absolutely rapt when they hear that this is coming to the Centreway, because there will be that many pizzas going out that night, I would say. It will be very exciting, and I'm sure a lot of people will spend more than $17 a head on a variety of things. So it can be extremely exciting for the Centreway and hopefully down the track. Someone did bring up contingencies before. I hope there's a contingency in place at the case that there is a massive turn up and we can't actually fit everyone into our square. Look, I'm extremely optimistic, but I'm also, we know how people from Rosehill Ward get behind some of these events, so just make sure that if there is an overflow of enthusiastic Socceroos supporters, we've got a plan for that as well. Thank you. Now, Councillor Sharp, would you like to close?
Can I please just add something to point B? I'm sorry. Australia be playing in the match at a suitable televised time. At a suitable time. That's good. Everyone's happy with that? Okay, I'll just leave it then. Yep.
Okay. Are you going
I just don't want to have
close?
any.
You're going to close as it is? Okay, I'm going to put it to the vote. All those in favour as the motion as stands. Carried unanimously. We got there. Okay.
No, you have to, Mayor.
I think yes. I'll leave you my lovely notes. There we go.
Yeah, you'd have to put it on the...
Firstly, I'd just like to thank my Deputy Mayor for stepping in for me for the time being until I got here, so I do apologise for running a little bit late. Yes, I can confirm that I have no conflicts of interest on any items on the agenda as well. Next item on the agenda is 9.8. Council report on tonight's agenda is on page 92 as entitled Attendance at the 2018 ALGA National General Assembly of Local Government Councillors. Do I have a motion? Councillor Cusack.
Happy to move the recommendation in the officer's report.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Lawrence. Councillor Cusack, would you like to speak to the item?
The ALGA conference is an important conference of local government that takes in all of Australia. It provides an opportunity for our council to be present at discussions and debate about matters of local government that concern all of Australia. It also provides an opportunity for those attending to meet and contact and talk to people from different places about issues that, while they might not be exactly the same as in our municipality, they are areas where we can look at the questions for our municipality through a different lens. And I have attended several ALGA conferences and found them most useful from that point of view. I think the other point that I'd like to make in moving this motion is that there is a considerable amount of learning that individuals go through in this by attending. I would also note that in our changes to expenses and so on like that for councillors, one of the things that we're looking at is the notion of reporting. And I would be expecting my fellow councillors who attend to provide a report on the key and salient things that have occurred, both through the motions that are passed at ALGA and I suppose the messages from the key speakers, the keynote addresses, and also if there are any gems, I don't know whether there necessarily are, from the political sphere who speak at that conference, given it's an election, riding up towards an election year or a federal election, there may be more interest from all sides of politics in this conference.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Welcome back. Having been to one ALGA conference as a new councillor, and I still consider myself in that new category, I believe I probably learnt more in 3 days in relation to council and ideas and innovation than I've learnt in the 18 months that I've been sitting in this chamber. And that's no reflection on other councillors, but to be exposed to, I think it's 500 and something or other council oars from all over Australia, both those that operate within the inner suburban areas, both in Melbourne and in Sydney, and to be able to compare notes, both of a official nature and also those that are doing things differently, and those things that are doing things successfully. And I would encourage, particularly our newer councillors, to try and attend an ALGA conference, because there is a lot to be learnt, and there's some great speakers. I can highly recommend it. There's different ways that we can do things. There's different innovations that we can add to our own council here in Moonee Valley. So I think it's a great opportunity that I thoroughly got a lot out of last year, and that's why I'm putting my hand up to go back. And I'm more than happy to produce any report on speakers or motions, or even just ideas you pick up from other councillors. And that sometimes it's not even those that are in a similar type of council to our own, but I just remember, and I won't digress for too long, but a council over in Western Australia that has a monastery in it that nobody has ever heard of in Victoria, but it's famous throughout as a tourism attraction. And it's just these little snippets of things that you pick up. I mean, that's probably not something that we have, although we do have a monastery up in Napier Street, in Woodland Street, funnily enough. It's things like that just you click and things get your mind ticking over and get you out of this rat race of a council that sometimes can be a bit monotonous as things go. Now, I just also want to mention, because there is costings listed in that report, and I will not be costing the ratepayer of Moonee Valley any accommodation or travel, because I'll actually be in Canberra and travelling up there of my own volition, and staying with my daughter who lives in Canberra, and so therefore those expenses will not be at the ratepayer's purse. I'm not bragging about that. I just like to put that on the record. So all my cost is just the conference. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillor to speak? Councillor Sorais.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and welcome back. I've put my hand up to attend. I didn't attend last year for the ALGA National General Assembly of Local Government. The theme this year is Australia's Future, Keep It Local. So I'm kind of assuming that there's going to be a whole lot of issues that relate at the local government level. I'm hoping there are anyway, because we're always open to learning and gaining more information. And when you look at an organisation like ALGA that has been around since 1947, they've obviously done things right, and they've been able to produce some very good conferences on a yearly basis. I have attended a couple of them, and I find that they are, as Councillor Cusack has said, very informing and very interesting to know that not only engaging and the opportunity to perhaps meet with federal politicians and so forth, it gives us the opportunity to put forward Moonee Valley as a council as well, and some of the issues that affect our municipality, given that we have a major airport that people get to through our municipality, major road infrastructure, etc. And I think it's important that we can liaise with those people. As you know, I mean, we've been together on other ALGA conferences and they've been most successful. I generally do write myself when I go on interstate conferences. I come back and give in written reports, so I'm quite happy to do that again. I wasn't aware that you had family in Canberra, that you have the luxury of accommodation for Councillor Lawrence. But in the report it does say that the early bird fee is $9.69 and the standard fee would be $12.90, and if you were looking at 3 people paying for that as an attendance, that would be a $900 saving, which would actually cover one of the councillors. I myself probably wouldn't be attending the Women's Association breakfast. I can integrate and talk and engage with women from ALGA. They're usually the women that put that breakfast on, and I generally go to their other meetings, so that could be remiss. So apart from that, I'm hoping that Council will support my attendance, together with the other councillors that have put their hand up, and come back with some great information and insight.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillor? Councillor Marshall.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Sorais, in the context of the heritage motion, raised the issue of cost. And if I went out to the community and said, tell me, would you rather spend money on protecting this heritage property or sending councillors to flit around with their council colleagues up in Canberra, I think I know what the answer to that question would be. In the years I've been on council, I have not seen a single return on what is thousands of dollars of investment, and it's lovely that councillors go up there and have an enjoyable time socialising with council colleagues. I think that's fabulous. But my view is not what individual councillors get out of it, it's what does our ratepayer get out of it. And as I said, I could not point to a single thing that we have got as a municipality out of the thousands of dollars and the numerous councillors who have attended this event. I think it is a waste of money. If I was being incredibly generous, I would perhaps support the Mayor going, but that is absolutely it. And my concern is that with something like this, we just fall into that trap every year, saying, yep, send people up, without questioning why are we doing it, without questioning what value do we get out of it. So I would certainly, if this is supported and all the 3 councillors head up, expect that next year we actually do a serious detailed assessment, not just reading a dot point summary that councillors have done of various presentations. I mean, I can go on the internet and get you that for 5 cents. What we need is to be very clear. Okay, what are the KPIs we expect when councillors go into state? And have those KPIs been met? Because as I said, I legitimately could not point to a single thing that this municipality has got out of sending councillors to ALGA. I think, as I said, Mayor, I would sort of support at a stretch you going, but I certainly can't support sending 3 councillors up there. You know, the way I learn about things, I've never been to one of these. I've heard lots about them, and which is one of the reasons why I haven't been, because I just know that you can generate ideas by reading. You can generate ideas by talking with people, by going online, by attending one of the numerous conferences that are down here, by speaking with people, by attending PAC meetings. There are a whole range of ways that you can get good ideas. You certainly don't need to fly up to Canberra and hang out with councillors to get good ideas. So in this form I can't support it. As I said, we really need to do a serious review about this because we just fall into this trap of just sending people without really questioning what are we getting out of this. Because my view is nothing.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillor I'll say for you? Councillor Gauchi-Marici.
Thank you, Mayor, and welcome back. I guess I echo some of Councillor Marshall's concerns. I am more than supportive of Moonee Valley having a representative there. That may be the mayor of the day. I'm supportive of councillors going occasionally to be able to build their understanding or form networks. I'm supportive of us having some representation there. I guess for me the real question is, do we need to send 3 people every year? And what's the return on investment for us for ratepayer dollars for $12,000? I'm pleased to hear it's less than $12,000 this year. If we're not paying for accommodation for council allowance. But for me to say $12,000 gives us nearly a community event in Centreway for hundreds of people, or 3 people on a trip to Canberra, I think we just need to really think about the number of people we send each year and alternating who that might be if there are others that want to attend. I'm certainly saying I might want to attend at some point in the future if I get to have a break from children, but certainly to think about whether we send 1 or 2 each year rather than 3 and what the return on investment is. And the other one, which I just wanted to flag as a concern for me, is the fact that we paid to attend, for 3 councillors to attend before there was a resolution of council. That bothers me. So that really bothers me. Early bird rate or not, it concerns me given the motion may not get approved.
This is not supported, yeah.
So.
Is that it? Any other councillor like to say a few words? Councillor Byrne.
Okay. I feel like this debate around the chamber was almost exactly the same 12 months ago. And funnily enough, I think that the story in the local paper and the Herald Sun next week will probably be exactly the same, except for the names of Councillor Sorais instead of Councillor Cusack. In regards to Councillor Trio justify interstate conference trips courtesy of Moonee Valley ratepayers. It received quite negative publicity online at the time, and I think answering Councillor Marshall's in terms of what the public thought about it 12 months ago was it didn't go down well, and I don't think that it will go down well again, and I will not be supporting it as it stands. I'm actually extremely supportive of you as the mayor going. I have absolutely no issues at all with the mayor attending an event like this. In fact, I would encourage it. I would say that the mayor absolutely should be attending. In terms of other councillors, I'm not saying that there's not benefit for the councillors to attend, but I think that the benefit is actually more individual, and I think that that's what we receive a councillor allowance for. We don't receive a councillor a wage. You know, we get $20-something thousand a year to attend these things. So I won't be supporting this, even though it is a state election year, potentially a federal election year. I didn't see a return on the investment last year. I don't believe that the ratepayers of Moonee Valley saw a return on investment last year, and I'm disappointed as well that it's already been paid for. I'm not sure what the refund policy is, but yeah, that's where I stand.
Thank you, councillor. Any other councillor like to say a few words? I might say a few words myself. I understand your sentiments and your concerns about this, Councillor Marshall, but I probably have to get back to the point where Councillor Lawrence and I went and saw Minister Freiberg, and we extracted $100,000 out of Minister Freiberg for solar panels for some of our clubs, and some of our clubs have actually applied for it and they are receiving the solar panels. So last year's trip was very fruitful. We got.
Can I just ask for a point of clarification through someone? Which clubs and whether we've actually received the money?
So the mayor has expressed this sentiment. I have a question with the officers at the moment to confirm. My understanding is that East Killer has solar on their roof. We're just trying to confirm the funding source that paid for that, but as yet I haven't been able to confirm. I'm waiting on an officer to return from leave who understands the background for the funding source.
So we don't know that we've actually received the money?
I cannot confirm, yes.
Okay.
Mayor, can I flag a motion, foreshadow a motion, sorry, that if this is lost, that I'll be moving a motion that you attend?
Sure. And just the other thing that I need to say is that at the Albert Conference, Moonee Valley has a motion up there, and it's in regards to our bee rehoming. So we're encouraging all Victorian councils and all councils throughout Australia to, instead of exterminating bees, to rehome them. So someone has to be there to speak to the motion at the Albert Conference.
Just as a point of a clarification, because I haven't been either, is that just one person, or do multiple people speak on the bees?
Oh, just the one person. Then other councillors from other councils will speak for and against it as well. So it's like a council meeting, basically.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, Councillor Cusack, would you like to close?
Yep. Conferences can be good or bad. They can be informative. They can be educational. They can be none of the above. You can get carried away with the front page headlines that occur in newspapers about doctors going off on cruises up and down rivers and around the Whitsundays, care of chemical companies flogging different chemicals and snake oil fixes. This is not what this is about. This is part of the legitimate process of local government in Australia. There'll be over 500 delegates from all of the councils across, well, most of the councils across Australia, certainly those that can afford it and have the capacity at the time. It is also because of that well-attended doings, it means that local government issues are at the forefront the whole time. This is not a conference that goes up and down various tributaries of the Amazon. It is not a conference that has all sorts of sightseeing trips or any of that rubbish assigned to it. It is actually 3 days of pretty hard and intensive work. If you look at the agenda, you'll see that. What the conference has done for us in the past, in the last conference, the bigger debates were around the digital age and turning your local government area into a digital city and hooking onto the federal arrangements and opportunities that are within that. That was a motion that was brought to this council. It kind of didn't go anywhere in a hurry, but we do need, and we have started as a council, to think very seriously about where we're placing ourselves in the digital age. The other part of it was certainly about the environmental issues that we've been able to bring back. I should have mentioned that Councillor Lawrence has raised as a motion the question about Wi-Fi and so on like that, and I have a standing motion around the issues of providing electric cars and so on like that. It's interesting to note that one of the presentations last year was on an incredibly well-known hub that has appeared in Western Australia in one of the areas there. The same hub design and its structure is being used as a demonstration model of what our council might look to at the Flemington estate.
Councillor, I might have to wind you up.
Yeah, I just want another couple of words. I won't take very long. So, look, it's local government specific. It's not about going out on jaunts. The conference is well run, it's well organised, it's about doing business. It's also reflective of how other businesses do business. And so to take an arm of local government and suggest that our councillors can't participate in this broader thing except just through the mayor is not quite sensible. It doesn't mean... It is important that councillors do the learning. It is absolutely important. The council is supported in doing learning in all sorts of ways, except that the Municipal Association of Victoria runs learning at the wrong bloody time. We're actually thinking as a council about our position in respect of that. And so we have constantly tackling that thing. How come we can't place our council in the thinking place about what the national issues are, instead of being just that small-minded and deliberative thing within the bounds of Moonee Valley? And I'm afraid that only letting the Mayor do that is not a sensible way to go. It is about bringing a broader message and, over time, all councillors having a share of that opportunity.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillors, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? You want to read them out, Alison?
Councillors Sharp, Councillor Nation, Councillor Sypek, Councillor Cusack, Councillor Lawrence.
All those against?
Councillor Marshall, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Gaucho-Murci.
You're abstaining. Okay. All right, carried. Thank you, councillors. Council report on 9.9 on tonight's agenda is on page 95 as entitled MAV State Council Motions. Councillors, do I have a motion?
Happy to move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Byrne. Councillor Sharp, would you like to speak to the item?
Just quickly, I'm looking forward to reading the 49 odd motions that are within this report, but also the 50 odd that have been submitted late over the next week, so I can be fully prepared to vote at next week's State Council meeting.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Byrne, would you like to speak to the item?
Yes, I will. Thank you. I'm just getting it up right now. No, I just wanted to say thank you to the governance team who helped put together the recommendations on all of the motions so that we actually know where we stand in terms of council endorsed positions. And sorry, Councillor Soros, was that? No. And also, Councillor Sharp, good luck with the motion Victoria the place to be. I'm sure it will be... No, I'm not going to say anything silly, but no, wait.
Thank you. Any other councillor? Councillor Cusack.
Just noting that there was advice provided a little bit earlier this evening through governance that there are a number of motions that have come through the MAV that our governance team haven't had a chance to get advice to councillors, so we're aware that this will be delivered to Councillor Marshall, Councillor Sharp and all the other councillors by the end of the week. Is that right? Yes. Yeah. So I just want to again ring the bell for what Councillor Byrne said and thank governance for putting that together and providing us with some direction. That's an interesting first for this council. And also, the offer is still there, Councillor Sharp, in the lead-up, especially as we look at those other motions that haven't had advice yet, whether you would like to discuss those via some sort of hookup or whatever. To stand on the table.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Councillor Nation.
Thank you, Mayor. I will sound like a broken record, but I think it's worthwhile. I do commend the governance for putting this comprehensive list of motions matched up with council policy for our MAV attendee, because I definitely will admit after the past 2 or 3 MAV meetings, not that I was in attendance, but I did have frequently raised the issue that the MAV delegates should be provided with enough information to make a reasonable decision based on council policy, and it shouldn't be up to... it's asking too much of that individual to wing it and formulate opinions either on the spot or in the week beforehand. So thank you very much to Ms Watt and Governance, because I have regularly criticised us not presenting a document like this and presenting a document in advance of the meeting. So thank you very much, and let's hope that continues. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillor say a few words? Councillor Sharp, would you like to close?
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Governance, for the work putting all that together. But yes, definitely, Councillor Cusack and other councillors, if you have any thoughts about any of the proposed motions, please either call or email me over the next week. Happy to chat to you about anything that's on the agenda.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Council Report 9.10 of tonight's agenda is on page 97. It's entitled Local Area Traffic Management Plan Study Consultation Process. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Sorais.
Move the officer's recommendation.
Yep. Do I have a second to that?
No,
Councillor
well, I
Marshall.
was actually going to ask, can we add a point which was circulated, so to include a review, given this is a brand new process, so that would read the second one.
Yep.
That within 3 months of the first LATM utilising the new process concluding, officers prepare a further report which details how the revised process worked, any issues that arose through the new process, and whether any refinements to the process are needed.
I'm fine with that.
Okay. Councillor Sorais, would you like to speak to the item?
Yes, basically it is a bit of a trial and error situation. In revising the process for undertaking the LATM and removing the requirement to undertake the study group committee meetings and the tasks relating to this component, including but not limited to the development of the draft LATM Council report, multiple accompanied site visits, phone calls, meetings and bus tours. The process, which was normally or currently at 393 days, with an officer time equating to 160 hours, would be reduced to 316 days, which is about a 20% reduction in length, and a total officer time of between 75 to 97 hours. Basically, the revised process maintains the milestones associated with the development and implementation of the LATMs, including community consultation. It's envisaged that officers will be able to efficiently and effectively improve the management of this important body of work through the incorporation of the revised methodology, and in turn improve the delivery of the capital works projects associated with the implementation of the LATMs. So it kind of brings it a little bit further forward, reduces the manpower or man-hour time in all of this. It works in with Council's plan and policy, and together with what Councillor Marshall has added to the motion, we will be reviewing this anyway, so let's give it a go and see how we go in the interim.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Marshall.
Look, I'm happy to support refinements to the process, in fact significant changes to the process. As a councillor, like many others sitting around this table who has sat at numerous of these LATM meetings, and there is a lot to be said for the way that they have occurred, but they take so long, and that is the difficulty. And from the time you commence a LATM to the time you implement the measures approved through the LATM process, conditions can already have changed, and so sometimes things become obsolete. So I'm pleased that this is looking at shortening them. I'm a little bit concerned that removing the meetings entirely will lead to issues being lost, and that's probably the benefit of those meetings, the ability to thrash out some of the issues and think about things that wouldn't be picked up in the surveys. Obviously, the other big issue that stunned me the first time I attended my first LATM meeting was the low level of return that we get on the surveys. And we can do every single thing possible to get the surveys out there to encourage people to fill them out, and we really do get low levels of return. So that, again, probably is a little bit of a reservation I have, and we really need to work and do all we can to try and improve those levels of return for the consultation surveys, because what we often find then happens is that once the measures are implemented, then people turn around and they'll say, well, I'm not happy with that. We want to avoid that situation, and we want to make sure that we get all of these issues up front. But hopefully, again, if we review the process, the new process, see how it worked, and if it leads to some efficiencies and getting these things done in a much quicker way, making sure that community are on board, then I'm all for it.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other Councillor Nation?
Thank you, Mayor. I concur with my fellow councillors that this is something that we probably haven't done as well in the past, and it's a process that needs to be more efficient. Councillor Marshall touched on the period that the consultation lasts, and the report says it can blow out to 390 plus days. There is then the rollout of the actual traffic measures that are the outcome of the LATM, and they can drag on for 2 or 3 years. And it's something that, again, I've internally been critical of, and Mr Richardson and Costa in the traffic department have really moved to a more efficient model of delivery of those treatments or changes to road signs, directions, etc. But I think the original LATM that we did as a group of councils was Flemington Hill, which was flawed. I won't retouch that, but that was almost a thing that lasted throughout the council term and is probably still going. And then we've had Holmes and Dean, Holmes Road and Dean Street LATMs, which dragged on a 4 or 5 year period. And Mr Richardson knows that I was routinely chasing him up every 2 weeks for an update on particular measures, and we've got that delivery side really under control and some reasonable timeframes. So this will then hopefully speed up the preliminary process or the desktop process, the consultation review process, and hopefully by the time those measures are rolled out as part of LATMs, the traffic movements haven't changed so much over a 4-year period that those treatments are then outdated, and hopefully we can actually get some good outcomes from our LATM process.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other Councillor Lawrence?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just to take up a point that Councillor Nation mentioned in relation to timeframes, I sat on a LATM committee prior to becoming a councillor for the St Teresa's area, and one of those recommendations that came out of that LATM from the start of the LATM to the actual implementation was some speed humps that just happened to be in the street that I currently live in, and everyone knows I don't have a big fan, but 5 years it took for those speed humps to get in. I can only laugh when I think about it now, and the irony is it's in my street. However, anything that improves LATM plans, reduces the red tape, and that goes with them and makes the whole process of planning and development of LATM precincts is better, and for me that's a good thing. So to reduce the time by 20% is efficient, it's effective, and it's good government practice, be it local government practice. Less time, less cost, less waste, less wasted volunteer hours, and less wasted councillor officer time and expense. It's all good to me, and having spoken to Mr Richardson about this previously, I'm sure he's in agreement. Thank you.
Councillor Cusack.
Thank you, Mayor. I think LATMs are the classic clash of not in my backyard versus what I want to see happen in my backyard and make it easier. And if you're in that tussle, I don't know that you can ever win. And first of all, I want to applaud Councillor Marshall for sticking the notion of a review in there. I think that's really important. Just a couple of reflections though, and Councillor Nation got me to think a bit about the whole situation, especially after the Flemington Hill business. I like the notion of laying it out like this. Many people don't see a roadmap like this when they start in the LATM process, and this can at least give some straightforward direction for that. But I would like to see some sort of commitment in this process to ensuring that communication to the community is somehow lifted up a bit. We've got all these maps that have millions of lines on them, and people just don't understand them, quite frankly, and some of the language people don't understand. I would just simply like to see a front page attached to some of this, sort of saying, you know, this is what it's going to mean for you as you drive down X Street or whatever like that. Trying to read a street with about 8 different colours running up and down it where different parking restrictions might be or traffic things might happen is very hard. The other thing that buggers me on this is after the experience of the Flemington Hill, Vic Roads was decidedly quiet on a lot of this stuff, and it dragged on forever and a day, and we never quite got to know where any of that sort of thing was going. And so somewhere in this and building in these timeframes, what we should be also looking for through the review process is something that leads to best practice, so that over time we can at least maybe say 12 months or so down the track that we've actually started to sift through the data and sift through what community is saying and sift through the questions of how you're best advised about things and all the rest of it. Unfortunately, the only response rate that I've ever seen that's any good is when there's been such a blue in a street that we had the initiative of people literally going and door knocking every person in that street and saying, yes or no, what do you want? And that was the only time I ever felt absolutely comfortable about something. It's a shame that we get to that point. And I don't know. I mean, it's also worthwhile thinking a bit about how do we mediate the thing when it becomes a 50-50? What does that really mean? And how can that be a serious expression of what a community wants? All hard questions for a review.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillor? Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think I might have a slightly different view about this from other councillors, but for me, local area traffic management plans are vital to achieve a holistic view of traffic and parking within a certain geographical area. I've sat on various LATM groups over my years on council and have always felt the meetings to be very useful. They've been useful because members of the community and traders also sit on these groups, and these people come with such a wealth of knowledge about traffic and parking in their local area. I understand the process may be long, the current process may be long, and I understand the frustrations of other councillors, but I do not agree that the study group should be eliminated from future LATM processes. It is a vital part of community engagement to actually hear from people directly impacted by traffic and parking, and I really and truly don't believe you can garner such information from surveys and questionnaires on paper. Discussion and conversation is imperative in these circumstances, and I do feel that by not engaging directly with the community, we are really losing sight of what we really want to achieve through the LATM process.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillor would like to say a few words? Councillor Serace, would you like to close?
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your comments on that. It should be noted that this isn't excluding community consultation. As the background report says, it still has an inclusion of community consultation. So I don't really have anything more or less to add to the motion as it stands, so happy for you to put the motion.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Would you like to read them out, Ms Watt?
Those in favour, Councillor Serace, Councillor Nation, Councillor Marshall, Councillor Sypek, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Cusack, Councillor Gauci-Marucci, Councillor Lawrence.
All those against?
Councillor Sharp.
Thank you. Council Report 9.11 on tonight's agenda is on page 101 and is entitled Notices of Motion Quarterly Report. Councillors, do I have a motion?
Move the motion.
Councillor Serace. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Sharp. Councillor Serace, would you like to speak to the item?
It's basically just receiving and noting the progress reports as per the graphs on the following pages on Appendix A. And notes that there's been no notices of motion from the period of 13th of February to 27th of March, requesting Council to write to the members of Parliament or government agencies. I just have a query on one of them on page 255. It was one that I actually raised back in March 2017. It was completed on the 4th of April, but I don't actually recall. I don't know. Maybe if I could just perhaps get another copy of the report. The notice of motion was about the proposed tolls on CityLink at the time, and item 3 of my motion was requesting a copy of traffic impact assessment / modelling outlining the impact on Moonee Valley's road network of the expected increase in heavy vehicle traffic day and night, avoiding the tolls and proposed mitigation measures. I can't recall actually getting copy of that report, so could that please be followed up? I know that it says here that it's been completed, so
Notice.
that would be fine if you could take that on notice, but I don't have any further things to add. Thank you.
Councillor Sharp, would you like to say a few words? Any other councillor? Councillor Gauci-Marucci.
Thank you. I just wanted to briefly flag the one that I raised last time this came before us has been updated to reflect the items that are outstanding. It was the notice of motion number 17 regarding Buckley Street level crossing. So thank you to the officers for updating those comments. It was literally a year ago, and the items that are outstanding are still the comprehensive impact assessment and the suite of improvements that we required under the Alex Array plan. We are still yet to see the traffic reporting, and in the 3 months since we chose not to pursue discovery, we're still yet to see outcomes or commitments to the issues which we've raised. So it is one that we need to continue to advocate on strongly, please.
Thank you, councillor. Would any other councillor say a few words? Councillor Serace, would you like to close?
No, put it to the vote. Thank you.
I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Council Report 9.12 is on tonight's agenda is on page 103, is entitled Reports of Assembly of Councillors March to April 2018. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Sharp.
Sorry, move the officer's recommendation.
Do I ask Councillor Serace will second that. Thank you. Councillor Sharp, would you like to speak to the item?
No, thank you. No, thank you. Sorry.
Councillor Serace, would you like to speak to the
No,
item?
it's straightforward.
Would any other councillor like to speak?
Sorry, Mayor, just a point of clarification. In the report, some of the assemblies of councillors have items that are actually don't fit in the box. If I'm looking, yeah. So I don't know if that means that we can or can't move them, or if because there are the box of matters considered, you can see that it's definitely cut some off. So whether or not there's more items underneath that, particularly the business promotion pack, there's a line that it's cut off, but there's quite a few where it doesn't fit into the box.
Yes, what, could we just defer this to the next meeting?
Back to the next OCM.
All right, okay, so would someone...
Get a motion to defer.
Yeah, well, I need a motion to defer this. Councillor Nation, do I have a seconder? Councillor Gauci-Marucci. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Nation? Councillor Gauci-Marucci. Any other councillor like to speak to it? Councillor Nation, would you like to close? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Councillors, the next item of business is notice of motion, and we have one notice of motion listed tonight. Therefore, I call on Councillor Byrne to present her notice of motion entitled Improved Signage and Line Marking on English Street Bridge.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. My iPad's gone out, so I'll have to read it off the screen, but I'd like to take notice that the ordinary meeting of council to be held on the 8th of May 2018, it is my intention to move that as part of the City Link / Tullamarine Freeway widening and English Street Bridge upgrade. Council requests the CEO to write to the Minister for Roads, the Honourable Luke Donnellan, and Member for Nidru, the Honourable Ben Carroll, and Member for Essendon, Mr Danny Pearson, requesting improved overhead signage and line marking to the English Street Bridge from both the Airport West and Essendon Fields directions. Council also requests updated signage on Buller Road and the Buller Road Bridge for the entrance to the DFO and an investigation into the new traffic light sequence to allow priority for vehicles on Buller Road entering onto the Tullamarine Freeway.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Do I have a second? Councillor Sharp. Councillor Byrne, would you like to speak to the item?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think this is one of the, hopefully, one of the easier notice of motions that will come through the chamber. It is something that I've been waiting since probably January of last year, I believe, when most of the Tulla widening was done. But it sort of just hasn't quite come. I don't think the signage is appropriate. And as you would know from other Rosehill Ward residents, we often get rung up, and Councillor Serace as well, saying someone is probably going to be killed when you leave Lamanas and try to either turn down Matthews Avenue, go down Hood Street, get back on the freeway. It's the project itself is wonderful, and I understand that it's taken a long time to get to this point. But it's now come to a stage where it is really unsafe. And I think that we need to, as a council, just write to the members and the minister, just to say we really do think that we need signage here. It's not hard. It's a letter. There's not going to be a cost to council except for a postage stamp. And the other end as well, I'm sure Councillor Sharp will talk from the other end of the bridge in terms of where Buller Road is. But it's just so that it's also on record as well that we know that there needs to be improvement here. Thank you.
Councillor Sharp.
Thank you. Yes, firstly I must thank Councillor Byrne for initiating this notice of motion, and I requested that the issues at the top of Buller Road be added. So, as I'm sure we're all aware, we have the recent works which are still to be finalised. I need to add that. At the top of Buller Road, entering onto the freeway and into DFO, traffic lights have recently been installed at this location, and these effectively bank up the traffic on Buller Road, right back to Woodland Street, especially in peak times. So the traffic has never, ever been this bad in this location, and I've received a lot of complaints from residents regarding it, and I'm hoping that at a minimum the traffic light sequence can be altered to at least give priority to traffic on Buller Road so the gridlock can be alleviated to some degree. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Does any other councillor say a few words? Councillor Gauci-Marucci.
Thank you. Just briefly, as the others have mentioned, I similarly travel regularly both on the Buller Road and the English Street ends, and they are both accidents waiting to happen. In particular, I'm really pleased to see the Buller Road issues added in the month or two since that extra lane has been added. I have personally witnessed multiple near collisions and had feedback from residents about multiple near collisions of either people in the wrong lane for DFO or trying to merge from the stupid little half merge lane onto the freeway. So I am really pleased to be able to support this and hopefully have some improvement.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillors? Councillor Sorais.
Just a question, point of clarification. I'm not sure whether, probably point of clarification to Mr Richardson. Were these not issues that were discussed in the preliminary discussions with CityLink, Transurban, etc., when they were being designed and set up? Weren't these concerns that would have been addressed by council to those organisations?
Apologies, my microphone's not working. Yes, both the English Street Bridge was raised with City, Tulla and Vic Roads at the time in terms of the cross-section as well as the line marking, and more recently the line marking has been changed in the last few months, which is probably adding to some of the confusion. It's still under a construction zone. In relation to Buller Road, it's still a construction zone, but I take on board that there is a significant queuing on Buller Road northbound. There was a lot of discussion, particularly around the actual Buller Road DFO bridge cross-section, and that's certainly been ongoing between Essendon Fields and Vic Roads about how that might work.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So I hope that this notice of motion will have a little bit more success than the discussions that our officers have put to these members, and that hopefully we will get a positive outcome.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillor to say a few words? Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just very briefly, the congestion on Buller Road is not just during peak hour either. It seems to be, doesn't matter what time of day, the traffic just seems to back up. So it's either the traffic light sequence, or just a failure of Vic Roads to read the flow of traffic going up Buller Road. I thought they'd actually done counters, traffic counters along there, but they obviously got that very wrong.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll just like to say a few words as well on the English Street Bridge. If we ended up line marking every which way, every which way car would go, we would have white lines all over the place. So maybe on the English Street Bridge it might be an option to actually have colour-coded lines. So if you're coming from out of Essendon Fields, you might follow a yellow line, or you might follow a green line, and then you'll know where you can exit and where you can't exit. So if maybe that might be a suggestion to the minister as well too. Councillor Byrne, would you like to close?
Thank you, Mayor. It's an interesting suggestion you have there. It is such a big intersection, and because of the success of Essendon Fields, there are so many people coming into and out of there on a daily, hourly, minutely basis, that it can just be quite chaotic. And obviously people coming on and off freeways at high speeds as well. So I found this quite an interesting notice of motion. Obviously it was brought up in regards to the Rosehill ward side around Matthews Avenue, and Councillor Sharp thankfully also brought it to my attention in regards to the Buller Road end. So thank you for adding that into the notice of motion. I don't need to add any more on. It's just that I hope that there's some improvement going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Next item on tonight's agenda is urgent business. And urgent business and councillors, do we have any items of urgent business tonight? No, we don't. Next item on the agenda is confidential reports and the business of confidential reports and councillors. We have 2 confidential reports this evening, so I would just like to thank our live streaming audience for being with us here tonight, and I'll bid you farewell as we go into a confidential report. Thank you.